Hello and happy Friday to everybody. Welcome to our PCA Live 3 at 3 edition today. Today we actually have more than 3 at 3. We've got a terrific panel of 5. Today's a very good topic that we're discussing, a very important topic, and we've got good manufacturer representation and good retailers and our state government affairs regional representative on the docket today. So we're talking about state associations and why they're so important and how they kind of function with us as the PCA in order to keep us thoroughly engaged at what's happening at local community levels as well as state levels, and particularly when it comes to everything from increasing of taxes, smoking bans, or other things that are harmful to our retailers and the industry as a whole. So I want to go ahead and bring up the panel today as when we're going to cover a lot of ground today. So I'm going to bring it up. First, we've got Greg Zimmerman, who is a vice president of the PCA and also a registered lobbyist in Pennsylvania who's been very involved with PCA, IPCPR for a very long time, particularly at the state level. Mr. Zimmerman, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you. Good to see you, Scott.
Good to see you too, Greg. And we also have another one of our former board members and a great retailer from Colorado, Veronica Fenner. How are you doing today?
All is well. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Great to see you, Veronica. Joining us from Kristoff Cigars is Alex Harding. Alex, as a sales rep for Kristoff, how are you doing today, Alex?
Doing excellent, Greg. Happy to be here as well.
Outstanding. And the last one is the bald heads. That's in the glasses. It gets confused. Greg's more stylish than I am with that coat on, though, so all good. And then last but not least, batting cleanup here is Tyler Henson. Tyler's a regional government affairs representative for us who focuses on several states and does a phenomenal job for us. I often wonder if he's got several clones by the amount of work that Tyler's able to do, and he does a lot of great work on behalf of all of our retailers in multiple states. So Tyler, welcome. How are you doing?
Good. Better than I deserve.
Oh, well, that makes two of us. So good. So today we are talking about state associations. And I just kind of want to start off with talking about each of your perspectives from the various areas in which you approach the industry, why state associations are so important and why we do need to, especially at this time, focus a lot of our energies on how we can either begin state associations or leverage them more completely in order to help us win these fights at all of these different levels. So I kind of want to start off with Alex, in your perspective as a sales representative and from a manufacturer perspective, the importance of state associations and involvement in them.
Absolutely. So from a manufacturer's perspective, we obviously want to do as much business as we can across all 50 states. And the state associations really make that possible for us. Now, for me personally, I love the industry for the industry's sake. I love selling cigars, but if I didn't have that job, I would still want the industry to be around. And again, the state associations really help foster that business and foster that community, which is really important for keeping our passions alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Veronica, from a retailer perspective, for you, especially there in Colorado, your perspective on the importance of state associations and your involvement in it and why it has meant so much to you in your business.
Well, I think we really need to have a state association so that you have an organized coalition of retailers to confront the issues. I know for us, having the association makes the contacts easier. We're able to get people to the Capitol when we need to. Each store has their own representatives that they are familiar with and that they know. And so you get a lot of information that just comes down the pike that we can share with one another, which helps protect our business. And I think that's just a vital part of the association.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greg, a similar question from you, although a little bit different, as you've overseen sort of the creation, some of the handbooks that we'll kind of talk about for state associations. From your perspective, in that regard, the importance of state associations as it relates to the global industry in and of itself, of the work that they do and how that helps influence the greater national organization as well.
Yeah, sure. I can provide an example at the end of this comment. First I wanted to point out I was very fortunate in the past to have some senior state legislative directors that helped create and develop and implement a very good state association playbook. And we had we published a handbook a few years back that kind of lays out all those things, and that was Matt DeGali and Rachel Hyde. So I wanted to thank them because they did a very good job in helping to develop that, along with a lot of other people. Feeney Helmuth was very instrumental. As a former president of the IPCPR at the time, she always was a big advocate for starting the state associations. And why that's important is because a lot of the stuff that we see now on the federal level starts down the municipal level, local level, the city level, then the state, and it percolates all the way up. T21 is a perfect example of it. Started in Massachusetts, I think. A lot of stuff starts in California, and it all migrates up. But I mean, the main purpose, and I think Veronica hit the nail on the head, is that forming a state, so you want to protect your business. People ask me a lot of times, why are you a lobbyist? And basically, it was just to save my own butt, just save my business. So I went and I registered a lobbyist. I thought you had to be a lobbyist years and years ago, back probably in the late the 1990s or early 2000s. And I thought the only way I can get in to see a legislator is to be a registered lobbyist. So I went and looked up on how to register as a lobbyist, and led down the path to some other political stuff. But yeah, so you want to be the leading advocate in your community, your state. You want to be the one that is the voice, and you want to do that through education, advocacy, and you want to be able to influence policy. So that's why it's important to start these state associations, find like-minded retailers, and start from there, and come up with a mission, a goal, mission statement, and then move forward in formation of that association.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, we'll kind of get into a lot of those nuts and bolts that Greg just mentioned here in just a little bit. Tyler, now here's the kind of where the rubber meets the road perspective. You, as one of our regional lobbyists, you are one of those that are in state capitals on a very consistent basis. Talk about that importance of how state associations help you accomplish these goals and accomplish these milestones or objectives for retailers and for the organization overall, whether it's the state association or the national association of PCA, to protect retailers and guard against draconian laws, tax increases, et cetera.
Yeah. So, working with PCA and overseeing a very large portion of the country, as the regional representative, I oversee 13 states. And that's a pretty large geographic area. Some of my states run legislative sessions annually. Some of them are biannually. And so what is good about overseeing everything is I know what pieces of legislation are being introduced in all these state capitals. They get informed. And I can provide for our members a macro look at what's actually transpiring across the country and disseminate that information to them in a timely manner of what kind of things to look out for. Because if something's happening in one state, most likely it's going to transpire and it's going to trickle into another state when it regards to tobacco policy. Having state associations, though, is very key for me being able to do my job in a timely and successful manner, and also provide the resources that a state association needs. And what I mean by that is me overseeing a large geographic area, the information I get, the retailer at the local level who's engaged with a state association, with their local elected official, being city council members or their state senator, U.S. representative, they are more likely to get information sooner than I am, especially in regards to when they're just starting to discuss legislation. So a state association that's actively engaged will have information a little bit sooner than me, and that allows us to share information in a timely manner. So a state association will give me a call, be it, say, in like Washington State, or even in Colorado for some of our folks who may hear some information and say, hey, Tyler, I got information, a legislator is proposing this information. Well, if I didn't have a state association or people who are connected to elected officials there, I'd have to wait until that information really is publicly available for me to get, just because elected officials, they love hearing from the businesses they represent, especially if it's in their jurisdiction, and they're willing to reach out. The reality is having the person who comes in and flies in at the last minute or there, they're less likely to have that person in the back of their mind unless you've really cultivated a strong relationship with that person over the years. So, a piece of information tobacco policy happens, I'm not the first person they may think of, but the retailer in their district or the state associations who's actually engaged with them, they're going to be letting them know what's happened. And so that allows me to do my job more efficiently and allows the state associations to do it more efficiently. And then us working together to make sure that these policies don't move forward, or if they're good policies and they're pro-business, that we can't expedite the process on them.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So let's get down. So for those that don't have a state association right now, let's talk a little bit about how we start one and create one. Greg, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but so what are some of the key things we need to focus on? So first, the pillars, mission statement, that type of stuff. What is it that you need in order to get a state association kicked off and off the ground?
And then us working together to make.
I got some feedback there. Sorry. First of all, just recognize the need. Create a mission statement, find some like-minded retailers in your state, create that mission statement. The next step would probably be during the formation, there's some legal stuff that you would have to do. So you'd have to draft some bylaws, organize and develop a board of directors. You need a president, vice president, treasurer, probably secretary. You would need to, probably the next step would be to file with the IRS, get an EIN. You're going to form a 501c6, I think it is.
Correct.
And next you would draft some articles of incorporation. And then you would, at the state and local levels, you would also make all those proper filings that you would need to do with your state. So you have the IRS, you have the state, and there might be some local filings that you would have to do. And the next step is to start engaging some of the retailers in the state to get them active and to get them involved. So, I mean, that's kind of just the foundation of the start of an association, what you need to do.
So that, for those listening, even for me a little bit, right, that sounds like, oh my God, that sounds like a lot. Where do I start? And so how difficult is that in terms of getting all that going? I mean, it does sound like a lot, but I kind of also want to give people somewhat of a realistic expectation of, okay, we do need to get organized here. How much really does it take in order to get some of that going? Because a lot of resources really exist, I think, to help. And so anybody chime in here for what resources could we, I mean, we've got the handbook that we can offer, but are there other things too? And how difficult really is it to get going?
Let me just give a real quick one, and I'll let the other guys jump in. But everybody has a lawyer sitting in your shop that will do it for a box of cigars. That's what I did, and he was happy to do it. But it's a lot. It does sound very daunting, but it is a lot easier than it sounds. I mean, the Department of State in your state would have a very good layout of how to accomplish those things, but if you have an attorney that comes into or maybe you have an attorney that you have on retainer, they could very easily do it. Probably for under $1,000, you could have the association up and running.
Yeah, it's something that's been done across pretty much every industry that exists that has any kind of trade association or needs lobbying that they do have. And so I had when I was worked in transportation, and definitely it's a very big part of when I was with American College of Radiology, the state association, state chapter, as the way that it was there, was very much tied in with the national association. And so it's really a lot. I think the steps are there's a lot of them, but it's pretty fluid to go from one step to the next in order to get it up and going. It doesn't really take as much of a heavy lift at the start, I think, as some people might think. One question this kind of relates to this, and I want to talk about this. Once you get it up and going, then the involvement within the state association. And so, Veronica, I know you've been involved very much with the state association in Colorado. Talk a little bit about somewhat of the expectations for just the average member, and then also for leadership. And then I want to follow up with Alan Gold's question that he has here in just a second to talk about overall participation.
Well, in our case, it was a lot of, and I'm sure it is in a lot of states, it was finding out who the retailers are in your state. And PCA can help facilitate that, but then picking up the phone and making the calls and expressing to the people in your state what your goals are, what your mission is, what you're trying to accomplish with it. And it's just time. That's time consuming, but it's worth it in every way. Just pick up the phone. I found it really rewarding. I got to know the retailers in my state really well when we were forming, and that bond has really helped us through some pretty tough things over the last several years. And so it's going to take some time to reach out to people, email, call, to drum up the initial membership.
Great. Now here's Alan Gold's question, and I really like this one. And obviously there's going to be some differences of kind of opinions here, but number one complaint obviously is the lack of willingness of our retailers to sign up for these associations. We experience it for various different reasons, obviously at the national level. But what are some of the reasons why you hear across the board, whether Alex, if you've talked to retailers and they're not part of the state associations or others, why is that reluctance there? What is the reason why we can't get more retailers to? I mean, I get it. Maybe the PCA this year, et cetera, whatever the case may be, but 100% participation in the state associations should be a reality that we're all shooting for here.
And a lot of the kickback that you get could be anything from just pettiness, right? Shop owners don't get along or something of that nature, to various conflicts of interest. I mean, California is one state that doesn't have a state association. And that's simply because Northern California and Southern California, just as an example, have very different goals in mind. And so they provide real obstacles to the formation of a state association. Again, as you said, Scott, the goal really ought to be the same.
Yeah, and I can jump in on there too. So just to piggyback off of Alex, so from not being a retail owner, being, PCA's government affairs, and, having to go into states and really work proactively against some pretty bad pieces of legislation, either trying to outright kill a piece of legislation or amend it. One of the things that I look for is finding those retailers to be able to come down to the Capitol with me, testify, meet with legislators, so they can actually put a face to the business. The problem I've seen with states who either don't have an association or they're trying to form one and nothing seems to keep to get rolling, are usually in states too that have high concentrations of cigar stores and lounges, and it's competitive. They believe joining an association with each other with their competitor is somehow going to take away customers from that lounge and maybe send them to their competitor. That's what I've seen from a number of states around, like Arizona is a good example. There is a large amount of cigar stores and lounges there. And we have, for the past, I believe, 2 years, been trying to get the ball rolling on a state association there. It just hasn't really taken foot. And with such a large presence of the industry, they could be a very formidable presence at the state legislature on these issues. But there's some pettiness that does come up. Another issue, too, on top of that is when you don't have anything that has adversely affected your business for a number of years, it gets a lot of folks saying, well, why would I need to join a state association? Nothing's happened. But then when something does come down the pipeline and happens, then it's people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They don't know what to do. And then they try to scramble and get together and try to form a hodgepodge coalition that always falls apart. And so I think those are one of the two biggest factors, at least that I see in my line of work.
Yeah, it's kind of this is an example I heard used for a different situation, but it really kind of comes down to, you don't buy fire insurance when your house is on fire. And that's kind of it. The other thing too, what Greg pointed out, and that may have been true, even just as recently as maybe 10 years ago, to where, well, I'm in a very tobacco friendly state, and those issues that may come up in California or New York, they never really end up here. We could have said the same thing for Virginia. Virginia, very tobacco friendly. You can think about Virginia, but right now Virginia is facing tremendous obstacles now, just by the shift of the winds, the political winds that are going on now. Thankfully, Virginia's got a very good and active state association, but even there, obviously, dealing with some of these same issues about trying to get more people engaged and doing it. But organization is key in order for us to be able to focus on and attack and as well be proactive. And that's the proactive part that I kind of want to talk about here next. So one of the things, it's very difficult to be successful all the time when you're dealing with lobbying and legislation, when you're consistently on defense. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about how state associations can help us be more proactive and start going after more positive legislation or positive effects. And I'm just going to use as an example a tax cap. And I know we've had some success in places like New Mexico, I believe Minnesota, where we've been able to get some tax caps, and that's very beneficial and helpful. So if we can, let's talk a little bit about how state associations can help set us up to be more proactive, because ultimately at the end of the day, we need to be set up for both. We need to be tracking, as Tyler said, what's going on within these capitals as far as legislation will be harmful. At the same time, having a state association, being organized and connected, allows us to continue to have a legislative agenda year in and year out that we are promoting on a consistent basis. And one thing I will say too is what it allows, not to steal anyone's thunder, but it allows for strong coalition building. For a strong organized state association, we can build coalitions with other small business communities that are out there, and that amplifies our message exponentially and allows us to push a strong legislative agenda forward every single year, and it puts us in a much better defensive position. So Tyler, I don't know if you want to kick that one off as far as that importance, and then anybody else, please, kind of from your perspectives and experience.
Yeah, so coalition building is huge, and with any state association, especially with ones that are just trying to get off the ground, besides creating the internal structure and the framework and trying to get the dues, I always tell folks, one of the easiest things you can do to first start engaging your legislatures is come up with a survey that you are going to, a questionnaire, and send it to all elected officials. And this questionnaire needs to highlight, questions around the business, the tobacco industry, how much they understand premium cigars and pipe tobacco, if they support small business. And so what you do is you send this to every elected official or any candidate running for office, and you create an Excel sheet, and you can gauge exactly where an elected official is on our issues. And so from those, that it allows an association to tell who's going to be their allies, who's going to be their enemies, who's people that are maybe leaning towards them that they need to work on, and who's ones that they really need to, that are just staunchly against the industry. The next thing is also, I always encourage all of my members, and the state association can do this, is take every elected official, be it from the state level and from your local city councils, and you need to, whoever is representing your business, where your actual business address is, you need to invite them to the store. You invite them to their store, get to know them, and you need to educate them on the business, educate them on the product, be able to take a product, break it down, show them exactly how this product is made. Because in reality, a large portion of these legislatures and these elected officials, if you ask them, do you know what a premium cigar is? They'll shake their head, say, yeah, and you'll ask them to explain it. But they'll just assume that this premium cigar is the exact same as a grape flavored Swisher Sweet, or chewing tobacco or snuff or cigarettes are made the same way, they're marketed the same way, they're consumed the same way. And so building a proper education and understanding of the product is very key to getting these folks to understand, and then building those relationships. And you don't need a lot of money from an association to start off doing this, to start off small. You can do that as time moves on of raising money, but those are, I think, very important things to do initially at the beginning in regards to just coalition building, engaging your elected officials, and really getting that information out there and educating.
One key thing I think there that I think needs to be made, a point that needs to be made, is much as Greg said, where things start at the local level and end up percolating up to the federal level. One key thing you talked about here was education. We do that here on the federal level too, a lot, right? Educating people about the industry and the products is absolutely necessary to what we do. But think about this. The sooner we can get an advocate that understands us, a lot of people that start off in politics and end up at the federal level start at the state level and local level. And the sooner we can get those folks to understand at a local community level what this industry is all about, then by the time they get to the federal level and where their influence continues to grow, then that's when we have greater opportunity to leverage sort of their influence in that regard. Whereas if we're later on it's more difficult to try to get them and try to figure out where we fit within the rest of all of their different legislative goals or whatever their pet projects are. For example, there's one particular congresswoman who's very much a champion of ours. I won't mention her by name, but I know that she is very much a champion of ours, but she's also a champion of some other health initiatives and does a lot for different healthcare groups and health groups as well. So I know that navigating these issues sometimes is very difficult. So the earlier on that we can educate these elected officials, the better it is for us in the long run, because we have a longer relationship and they understand us much more clearly than as if we're starting way, way, way farther down the line. I don't know if anybody had any kind of follow-up, but there's a question I do have. Valerie Bradshaw asked a great question. She made a great comment here about how do we find out what's important, and how do we, Veronica, from your experience within your state association, is how do you keep your partners there engaged, your fellow retailers there engaged in the state association, if there is not an enemy at the gate, right? So what happens? How do you stay engaged? Are there other ways in which state associations can function if it's not just solely about the house being on fire, so to speak?
Well, fundraising is a good way to get your state association together, working on something common. The other thing is that our association does, if you have an issue going on, like there's a thief in the neighborhood, right? My association will send it out and say, this is what's going on, watch out for this guy, or, all, excuse me, all kinds of things that we engage back and forth with, something that's working for your store. We pick up the phone and we call each other and just check in. And I think all of that keeps people engaged, and we do it amongst all of our members. So I think in the long run, it keeps us more in touch so that when something does come up, we're more prepared.
Yeah, great. Hey, Greg, what about you in terms of keeping people engaged in the state association when there's not a political grenade ready to go off?
Yeah, I think Tyler hit on a couple good points, and Veronica as well. Having an annual gathering to do fundraising here in Pennsylvania, I was fortunate to have some other retailers that were very key and instrumental in putting together a fundraising project that we did out in the Pittsburgh area. And we did it for 3 years, and it was very successful. We raised quite a bit of money, and we have a little bit of a war chest that we're sitting on. So getting those retailers together in that kind of situation, I think helps build unity. And I think it kind of brings down some of the guardedness that somebody had mentioned earlier, that this is a competitive industry. So it is a little tough sometimes to get a guy that's 3/4 of a mile away from you, on board and involved, if you're a daily competitor of his. One thing I wanted to kind of point out, I want to just kind of demonstrate, I had an example of maybe another way of engaging your state legislators and on the local community, or at the local level all the way up through the state level. Tyler had mentioned conducting surveys to find out where these people stand politically on your issue. So you need to know that. But another thing I think you can do is invite them to your stores. But here in Pennsylvania, we developed a bipartisan cigar caucus. So it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, independent, somebody in all those parties smokes cigars. So we developed a bipartisan cigar caucus, and we do an annual dinner, and we'll get about 60 or 70, key influencers in the state, mostly state representatives, some senators. We've had the lieutenant governor at quite a few of our dinners, and it's a great way to educate them on your product and the industry as a whole, and how important those jobs are in the state. Prime example I had, I don't want to call him out here just in case he would be watching, but there was a chief of staff for the Senate majority leader that didn't realize that we collected sales tax on premium cigars in the state. And once I told him what that number was, he was shocked. So to be able to educate, even guys at that level didn't understand that. And I've used some of those relationships to even work up to the federal level. I had that bipartisan cigar caucus dinner draft a letter to send to our U.S. Senator Bob Casey to to sign on to one of our Senate bills a couple years back. I'm not saying that was the only reason he did. I mean, he understands how important the industry is in Pennsylvania, and a lot of our other associations, along with the CRA and TAA, they help develop that relationship with Casey as well. But I just see that it really does make a difference. It can influence those guys. I'm sorry, I'm getting long-winded here, but just one more quick example. We had a freshman congressman that we invited to the Bipartisan Cigar Caucus dinner on purpose. The day before, he had proposed a 40% tax increase on premium cigars in the state of Pennsylvania. And so he comes to the dinner, and he came in proudly with his Swisher Sweet, and he fires it up. And the chairman of the Cigar Caucus said, "Hey, I want to introduce a new member." So he makes the guy stand up, and he said, "By the way, this is the guy that wants to put a 40% tax on everything you're here enjoying tonight." They took the cigar out of the Swisher out of his mouth, threw away, handed him a regular cigar. The next day, the guy withdrew the bill. So it can have an immediate impact, but it also educated that guy, I mean, from the get-go. So he understood how important our industry is in your state.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's easy sometimes, I think, to forget how small we really are in comparison to what a lot of them go on, right? We do this day in and day out. It's it's livelihoods. It's what we all focus on consistently. We wake up in the morning thinking about it. We go to bed thinking about it, right? And for these policymakers, it might be 10 minutes in any given month or any given 3-month period that they think about this, or their policy directors that they have on their staff that thinks about this. So it's critical for us to be consistent with the information, but it's very critical for us to educate them. And that's one big thing for us. It's a no-brainer how different our products are, our industry is from other adjacent or tobacco or nicotine delivery system industries. That's not clear to a lot of people that just don't understand it. And so really it's the long game, right? We've got to be consistent. We've got to be patient. It's a ground game, right? We're sorry to use a sports metaphor, but we're pounding the ball, right? We're running the ball, and that's the way that we are going to get victories. Real quick here, Jessica Hudson out of St. Louis, Just for Him, asked a great question about the survey. Is there a template that other states have used that other retailers would be able to use to send out, Tyler?
Yeah, so we don't have a specific template. So since my time here being with PCA and really being at the beginning of our foray into doing the regional government affairs, I've made it a personal mission for any state that's looking at creating an association or maybe has one and it's just kind of languishing there, to do everything in my power to help them either get that association back up and running, restructure it, even offering that myself as a PCA to be a non-voting member of their board to help them out. But I'm always there to help them and guide them and craft a survey or questionnaire for candidates, just because I have a lot of experience doing that with my home state where I'm based in Colorado, but in the other 13 states that I oversee. So I understand the type of questions that should be asked, how they should be worded, and how to really grade those scales. So I always put that out to all the members that I'm here to help you as much as I can. I can't be there every single day, obviously, but and now with the in the post-COVID-19 area that we're dealing with, conferences like this, video conferences, are easy to do, and I'm here to help. And I know my other regional counterparts, Brett Meekum and Dave Jessup, we're here to handle and do the exact same thing.
Absolutely. So yeah, Jessica, we can easily get something set up and utilize for your state and your locality as well. This is more of a national question, sort of the national associations, but it is relevant to kind of some of the topics we're talking about how moving the industry forward. So Damon here asks a good question. Damon or Goldie, or if it's two people or one, but Damon Goldie asks how the three organizations that are primarily focused on the premium cigar and tobacco industry, how we're kind of working together to move the industry in a positive direction. I've obviously got some comments on that, but I'd like to have Greg, Veronica, Alex, kind of you guys talk about your involvement through the associations and how you are working through these various means in order for to promote and kind of push the industry forward and kind of where we're going. And then I'll take an organizational perspective after you all talked about it a little bit. So Greg, the question to you first is how are the three organizations, how are we coming together to kind of move the industry forward in a positive direction?
At the federal level?
However you want to answer that, because like I said, I'll take the organizational perspective, but yeah, if you want to talk about even at the federal level, that helps too. Yeah,
I mean, obviously our issues across all three associations that are mentioned there, PCA, TAA, and CRA. I mean, we all have the same issues. It's taxes, it's smoking bans, it's T21, it's the litigation with the FDA right now. So we have been working very closely with all three associations. I think have done a great job in working together. We're trying to become more streamlined as we get moved down that path. I think there's been a lot of duplication of resources over the years, and that we've always recognized that. And we are now making, I think, better strides as the three associations to come together and kind of streamline those efforts. I think that's pretty much, on the federal side.
Yeah. Alex, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
As I say, Alex, from your perspective as a manufacturer, you obviously have different involvement within each of those associations and work with them. From your perspective with the three associations, the work there and kind of what you see from that perspective, how are we doing, or what is it more that we could be doing type of thing in order for, again, progressing particularly our legislative agenda forward?
Sure. So obviously manufacturers are involved across all three of those organizations. One thing that all those outlets really do really well is bring retailers and manufacturers together, which is why we love every year the trade show option and stuff like that. That being said, I think manufacturers can do a lot more than just donate money and stuff like that. As a rep, I work across 8 different states, and so I have a unique opportunity, as do all sales reps for the manufacturers, to really be involved in each of those state associations that they represent, and to do that work and to show the retailers that we support their business. They are what makes our bread, and so it's nice to kind of give back and let people know that we care, especially when you get the right people behind the wheel, the right reps behind the wheel, to attend Capitol hearings and things of that nature. So I've encouraged our guys at Kristoff to do that a lot. We've talked about that on our sales calls, and other reps across other manufacturers as well. I've been talking to them to make sure that they are involved in the state associations and not just there to collect an order, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And Veronica, you did your time, so to speak, as a board member, but as a traditional member of the organization, what is your perspective on that in terms of the 3 different organizations and how you see the 3 organizations being able to come together and do some things to kind of push forward for the industry?
Well, I've seen great cooperation between the 3 organizations over my time in the tank, and I've loved it. Particularly with TAA and PCA, these bring us together so that we can have these conversations and really define what our goals are as far as our legislative goals and policy-making goals and all of that. And CRA has done a fantastic job of helping us get that message out to consumers, not just the retailer. And they have helped me in my own state to communicate with the consumers in my state on issues. So I think the cooperation is great, and streamlining going forward and continuing that work, I think, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And Damon, from sort of an organizational perspective, we are consistently on calls with CRA and working on, as Greg talked about, a lot of the federal legislative stuff, from everything from, trying to set up this listening session with the FDA, working with the Small Business Administration, Health and Human Services, trying to, again, extend and deepen the education and the understanding at those levels, at the federal policy levels, as well as coordinating efforts on the congressmen and senators that we reach out to, as well as working to get signatures on the exemption bills for both the S9 and HR 1854 for the Senate and House bill, respectively, for cigar exemption. So that's how we work. Now, how we kind of move the industry forward, and I think there's elements in all of that there, and I think there's a lot that's we've been working on recently, and that we're going to kind of redouble our efforts now as we face new challenges, not only legislatively, but sort of industry and organizationally. And I think that we are going to see a much more coordinated and concerted effort of following one track now, and how we accomplish not only legislative goals, but industry standards, industry goals as well, because they all relate. And again, not to harp too much on this, but coming from a healthcare background and going in healthcare, what they do, organizations within healthcare will do the same thing. There are, various, I came from radiology. There's 53, 54 different radiology societies that exist, because each little specialty has their own society. But when it comes down to when they all come together for certain things, whether it's the accreditation services or standards and technical guidelines for the industry, these all matter so much when it comes to what they do for their own lobbying efforts. And when they come together for things like best practices and standards, and it's agreed upon and understood and signed off on by the body at large of the radiology community, for example, it carries significant weight with policymakers, that they understand that there's a certain standard, there's a certain level. And so, for example, CT dosage and things like that. So that's something that I think that all of us are very keen on moving forward with, because right now the premium cigar industry needs to start setting those standards because of what we face. I've talked about this in a similar context of us building a regulatory wall around this industry. We need to not be susceptible to the whims of whoever gets elected into either the presidency, or if the House happens to swing one direction or the other, or the Senate. We need to build a regulatory wall around us. Once that's done, there's going to be things and programs in place that we need to maintain in order to make sure that wall stays as fortified as possible to protect us. That gives us the opportunity to have clarity and certainty in the industry for us to evolve and grow and reinvest resources back into the industry itself and the businesses, as opposed to continuing to try to fight these battles in some of these other spheres and these theaters. So that's a really quick answer. There's a lot more details that kind of go into that, but that's just sort of in a nutshell organizationally that we go into there. To follow up on this aspect, though, Alex, Veronica, Greg, and then obviously, Tyler, your perspective is very important here too. How can manufacturers and retailers, what are some of the best ways to work together through state associations to ensure successes at the state level? We've talked and hit on some of them, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper into this conversation, because for anybody that's either listening now or will listen to this later in the recorded session, really would like to kind of start getting this idea going that the partnership level isn't just, as Alex said, isn't just a donation, isn't just, coming to the trade show and that's it. That's the end of it. It's a financial component, because really it's going to take all parts of this machine working together, and involvement and activism is very much needed. So what are ways in which we can utilize the resources of our manufacturers, particularly at the level, at the sales representation level, working with retailers and state associations? What are some of these ways in which they can work together? And have you seen some of these instances where they have done it, and what successes have come about from it? So Alex, Veronica, Greg, that's all you. And then Tyler, do you want to offer your perspective on that too, from ways in which you've been involved with that too? That'd be great.
Well, I think it is incredibly important in that partnership. The manufacturers reps are on the road. They're touching all of the retailers in your state. I know for us, it has helped drum up membership on people that we've missed along the way. A manufacturer partner will say, hey, have you talked to so-and-so on the West Slope? And thank you. Give me their contact information so we can get them in line on the organization so that they can participate. If you have an issue going on in the state, the reps on the road, if they know what's going on, they are just invaluable to walk in and talk to the shop owner who hasn't had time to sit down and read all their emails or return that phone call. Yeah. And so rep partnership for our association has been incredibly rewarding and vital. And those that are engaged, like Alex, just can really help just drive the success of your state association.
Yeah. Greg, for you,
I'll just make one.
On that. Yeah.
I'll make one quick comment, and then I'll let Alex, since he's the pro at this end, on that end. But yeah, it absolutely. There's, I mean, only so many people that we can, in the course of a day, reach out and touch. But those guys are on the road every day, and I know my reps in the state here have really been invaluable. They've helped me to contact other retailers that may not really want to talk to me because they see me as a competitor, but once they realize that we're working in lockstep towards the same goals and that we have the industry, sometimes you got to take off the your business hat. That's back to some of the questions regarding associations. I've sat on this PCA board for quite a while, and sometimes you have to take off that business or your business hat and do what's best for the industry as a whole. And we make those decisions every day. But I'm going to let Alex, he can talk, probably a little more in detail on some of the programs maybe that he's used or.
Yeah, Alex, from the sales rep manufacturer perspective, the importance of kind of what you work with there, and we've talked about this in this instant in a little bit, but more specifically, when you are working with retailers on specific legislative issues, like and how retailers and manufacturers could work together there, because Greg talked about taking that hat off, and so I'm not not necessarily it's just Kristoff's going to work with the Colorado State Association. It could be Kristoff and a dozen of your competitors that are also working with all these retailers. So just kind of talk a little bit about that, the importance there, and how that collaboration could function, and why it's so important from your perspective that manufacturers really are kind of helping to rally that as well.
Absolutely. So one way that manufacturers can help, especially, is education, right? When you have these educational dinners or educational seminars with state legislators, who better to talk about what this product actually is than the person who actually sells it, right? And we can sit there and we can dissect the cigars, and we can say, hey, these three components, yada, yada, yada. You can go through and say, there's no filter in here, there's no paper, there's no there's no unnatural substances that deem our product as a health risk in comparison to any of the other things that, you might lump us in with on a legislative basis. And on top of that, Veronica hit the nail on the head and stole the words right out of my mouth when it's the communication with various retailers in that particular state. We've had a lot of success in Colorado with just that communication, that almost call to action urgency on behalf of the retailers to say, hey, you really ought to get involved. And, not only because this affects you, but because we want your voice to be heard as well, right? You're important to my business, but guess what? You're also a part of this bigger machine, and your voice is just as important as, any other retailer in the state. And so in those ways, as a manufacturer and as a sales rep and things like that, we can have a much bigger impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is important. We've heard from manufacturers lately about how they are concerned because they recognize kind of what is going to be coming at us within, whether it's the rest of this year, but particularly next year. I think everybody realizes that state budgets right now are very much they're the wrong side up at this point. And so they're going to be looking at ways to make up that revenue. And I think all of us should be very, very clear that we are going to have a bullseye on us. And so it's very important that is going to affect every aspect of the industry. And so it does take, and this kind of goes back a little bit to Damon's question. And I talk about that we need to be a tripod so we can't get pushed over, right? We need the retailers and the manufacturers, but that third leg of that tripod that we really need to come out and activate for us are the consumers as well. And, don't ever underestimate the power that you can have as a consumer, because, you are a local voter, and you as a local voter pay taxes. You have influence in your local community about in kind of who you can tell other people to vote for. You have family, you have friends. You may be a business owner who enjoys cigars that can actually have really good influence on these legislators who just quite frankly just don't know. So that's really that other component where we're working hand in hand with CRA really to activate and engage consumers on a consistent basis is very, very helpful. So and yes, Damon, the culture, the history, everything of this industry really truly does help set us apart from the other industries, and that's why that education key is that education component is so key for us, is because especially we've noticed this, and it's across the board. But one of the examples that I love to tell people is when we were with the FDA and the Office of Stakeholder Relations. They sat there, and Greg was with me. They sat there and told us one of the messages that resonates with them so deeply for us on our issues is that it's retailers, it's small businesses, it's corner shops, people owning tobacconists that are reputable. They have strong histories of being, adult products being sold to adult consumers, and that's where their focus is on stemming the youth access to nicotine delivery systems, not the other way where our tobacconists are adult products in adult stores, et cetera. So it's very much a difference in terms of how the consumers approach the product. And that's why consumers are so key in this education, because a business owner, that's fantastic. We understand it's your livelihood and that you're going to want to protect it. But legislators, when you hear from consumers about how they view and engage and are connected to the industry, it's very, very different. And then they start likening it to some of the other things that some of these policymakers love, whether it's fine wine, whether it's good scotches. I've even likened it because none of my family members smoke or even drink, so they don't understand those comparisons. But I liken it to a really nice Wagyu beef versus a Big Mac. And so there's ways in which we can describe the way that consumers engage with this industry. I want to know where that beef came from. I want to know how it's prepared. I want to know who the chef was and everything. And that's the same kind of approach with cigars, right? I want to know the history. I want to know where it's made. I want to know the flavors. All of that stuff is critical. And our consumers are so educated when it comes to that. You don't get that with nicotine addiction. You get that with people who really true. Veronica, you talked about this before. I think we came on the broadcast. I'm an art dealer, right? You are very much the artistry and the craft that goes into this is unlike any of the other tobacco products that exist out there. So all of that education is super critical for the legislators to understand when enacting any kind of policy, whether it's tax increases or smoking bans, et cetera, because they oftentimes will think, well, smoking ban means no kids are smoking cigarettes. Well, that's not what it means for this industry, and it's not what it means for our small businesses. So I just wanted to answer Damon's question there.
Well, Scott, you mind if I throw in my 2 cents?
Absolutely.
There, so if we're gonna rewind it back a little bit, and actually I'm gonna end with you talking about the culture and stuff of the cigars is, and my travels to the States, I have yet to find a representative when I ask them if they've joined the state association or PCA is helping form a state association, I have yet to find a representative who said, no, I'm not going to join that state association. Every single one of them says, yes, what can I do to help? What can I do to disseminate information and get as many retailers on board? And it's working then with those representatives who these guys are pounding the pavement, hitting every single shop. And there's shops out there that I'm still amazed and shocked that there's retailers who are not part of PCA. But it's they're able to get in all these shops, let them know for the most part, there's a lot of shops who they don't know what's going on. They don't know that there's these discussions happening at the local level or the state level because it boggles my mind, being somebody who's so engaged in politics, that there is a large portion of society who just doesn't engage in politics whatsoever, has no idea what's going on. And so the manufacturers are key to working with the retailers, because the manufacturers need the retailers sell their products and the retailers need the manufacturers so they have products to sell. And in my experience, working with the reps and the manufacturers, it goes hand in hand. And I could put an example is, last year in Arizona is a good example. When I was visiting down there last time, I had one of our members said, hey, I have an issue. The state came after me and said the Cavendish that I sell for my pipe pack Cavendish is not Cavendish. And because of that, they're charging a much higher tax rate. And, I asked him how much he had to pay in taxes, and I was shocked by how much Cavendish this store sold, and I didn't realize Arizona loves Cavendish. So that was a big problem, and said, this is something that we can go on the offense and fix. And we went and worked with the other associations. So CAA, who has a pipe council, gave them a call. I'm like, we're going to be running legislation we're going to set a definition of Cavendish, and so the Department of Revenue can't be doing this. They were looking and trying to get money, and we were successful. We worked with a or another organization, and that represents the manufacturers of pipe tobacco. And we got that piece of legislation passed. And it was actually one of the first pieces of legislation during that session to pass and get signed by the governor. So that was key. Now to go back to end with the culture stuff, the manufacturers and the reps, I think, are very key in educating elected officials, because what I like to tell elected officials when looked at, it's not just the product you see in front of you, that this product has tremendous ripple effects across our economies, because this product didn't originate in the retail shop. This product originated in the fields of Nicaragua and Honduras and the Dominican Republic. And the reps and the manufacturers are able to explain that from this, how this beautiful piece of work of art grew from the earth, how it was cultivated, but not only that, but how this product created this many jobs in these developing and these third world countries, and that we share this great economic scenario between the United States country, the individual states, the localities, and how connected we are to these other countries, and that by going after our industries, you're severing these economic ties that we have with these other countries, and that by charging us more money, we are going to be paying less, buying less, and that's going to trickle down to these countries where then they may have to let go some of these workers. They might be the workers who are cultivating the fields, the rollers, the people who are blending these products. So there's a tremendous effect. And conversations I've had with some states who, a lot of states and localities have these partnerships, sister relationships with other cities or countries around the world. And so they go on these economic missions to go meet with elected officials and to see how they can better engage and bring more commerce to their state and to their country. And I've had conversations with elected officials about this relationship they have. And they're like, I never thought about that, that cigars can be a platform for a way for us to go to these other countries and create these relationships, these economic relationships, and build these sister coalitions. And I think it's a great thing. It's a great opportunity. It's a great education. It needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one thing that we would be remiss if we always, when we talk about the culture of this industry, we always talk about how this industry gives so much back. With the amount of fundraisers and donations to other causes, whether it's childhood diabetes, whether it's cancer societies. But then you look at what these other foundations have done for schools and hospitals in the countries, in the Dominican, in Honduras, and in Nicaragua. This industry has a culture of giving back that I truly believe is unmatched in other industries, especially when you're looking at it per capita and what each store or what each manufacturer gives back to the community. That is very much a part of this culture. And I believe it underscores the family that this industry truly is. And so that's absolutely one part of it that nobody truly understands. And when we talk about that, everybody on down from senators, congressmen, all the way down to local elected officials, everybody is so thoroughly impressed when we go through all of the charity and the giving that this industry does. And it cannot be understated, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We are running right up on the hour. I would love to continue this conversation for a long time. Maybe we can do another follow-up here because this is really good. I do want to ask one question before I just ask some fun questions here. But for each of you, what has been one of the either most fun or creative sort of annual type of fundraiser or event that the state associations have done that you think would be great for other people out there to maybe try to replicate or do as well? Whoever wants to jump in on that as well, but I'd like everybody maybe to answer that.
Well, I pointed out earlier the two events that we do here in Pennsylvania, that Bipartisan Cigar Caucus dinner. That's a lot of educational, a lot of advocacy. There's a lot of, just getting to know some of the representatives, their position, where they stand. But I think for the fun one for us was we called it a gun bash. Now this is Pennsylvania. I know it probably isn't going to go over well in New York and California and some of the blue states, but we were able to raffle off guns, and we got together. We had food and we had beer, and we had all kind of raffles throughout the day. And it's a very fun event, and people love to come to it. So it's been very successful, for us in fundraising here in Pennsylvania.
Very cool. Veronica, what about you?
I think the most fun one that we've done so far was rather than doing a golf tournament, we went and kind of took over a golf range once, and just did just silly competitions and raffles, and it was a lot of fun. And the customers loved it because not everybody was a golfer, So it was it was a great way to engage, and we got some of the wives that didn't smoke who came and enjoyed it because it was outdoors, and so it was a great time for all of us. It was a lot of fun, silliness.
I love that because for me, a bucket of 80 balls, I'm going to hit 2 great ones and I'm going to feel good about myself. So that's great. Alex, how about you? What have you seen in some of these maybe fundraisers or events that state associations have had?
Well, the cigar dinner or educational stuff with state legislators has always been excellent. We did one in Colorado not too long ago, and that was really great because you're actually sitting there with the representatives and the legislators who are doing stuff, right, making these laws, voting on this kind of thing. And just to see the wonder and the amazement in their eyes when you explain the product to them is a lot of fun. And then you can go on additionally to a bunch of people, customers. Every state has customers, consumers who have their own little podcasts and stuff. And suddenly you're spreading that message across which is then reaching down to the consumer level as well. So those are always fun for me.
Yeah. I wanted to mention one other one quick. We do a sporting clay shoot. That's also another one where we've had a lot of success and a lot of participation.
Very nice. I've done a few of these throughout my association management career. A couple of them that come to mind. The casino nights have always been really fun ones. People really enjoy that because then it's just a lot of fun. You've got Monopoly money, so everybody feels like they're a big player, right? Everyone's a whale when it's Monopoly money, and get to have a lot of fun doing that, whether it's poker tournaments or whether it's craps or roulette, that kind of stuff. So people get dressed up and have a great time. And another one we did was, the best way I can kind of describe it was kind of like a team scavenger hunt competition that took place over a few days. That was really a lot of fun. People got really competitive, but it was a lot of fun, and some good prizes that were donated for that. So that was a lot of fun too. So I don't know, Tyler, if you've seen any kind of annual events or fun those types of things that other trade associations have done, state associations, have done.
Yeah, I think there's 2 that come to mind that get done, and the first one is obviously annual golf tournaments, because they're a way to be a great fundraiser for state associations. And for the most part, since a lot of our members are not just retail tobacconists, but they're also cigar lawns, like cigar bars, they have a very good relationship with liquor distributors. And so they can put together these golf tournaments, and they get their liquor distributors to come and sponsor as well. And so their reps are coming out, they're sponsoring, liquor distributors are coming sponsoring. They have customers who are paying money for foursomes for these tournaments, providing great prizes at the end. You got liquor distributors, reps, and then just other people in general providing great prizes for raffles. And that's always been a great success and fun. Another one is similar to line what Greg was talking about. They do one in Colorado here called the ATF, Alcohol Tobacco Firearm. And it's at a clay range out in eastern Colorado. You go and you shoot a whole bunch of clays, and then afterwards it's a barbecue. There's cigars and alcohol at the end. So it's a great time, and they're events that they look challenging to put together. But again, and I'll just put another plug here that for myself as a PCA rep, I've mentioned to all my state association members, I'm here to help you. I can help you put together these things, coordinate together. I did that on my own. That this is something that I choose to help you with and engage with because I want you all to succeed. So I said, go to the PCA state advocacy page. My information's there, my email, my phone number. You call me, text me. If you are in the western part of the United States, Colorado over, including Texas, Alaska, and Hawaii, give me a call, shoot me a text, email. I'm more than happy to help you and get these things up and running. So.
Yeah, that goes for all of our state reps, and our state reps do more than just lobby on Capitol Hill. Tyler did a great job of researching some things for one of our members down in Texas who was having some issues, and we got relationships in these states that our state reps can do if you have questions, particularly as we're going through the reopenings and how things are working. And our policymakers they're trying to figure out their way through this, is like everybody else, right? And so some stuff makes sense, some stuff doesn't. Sometimes they're not necessarily sure how the downstream effects happen with the way that they're choosing to do these reopenings. So reach out to any of our state representatives, because we can help in that instance and get clarification or work some channels for you in order to either A, get you open, or B, get clarification on certain things. So I want to thank you for that. We are running out of time here, so I just want to do something here real quick. I just want to make sure that we can kind of say hi to everybody that's joined us today, because in the spirit of this and making sure that we all kind of stay connected, I just want to say Scott Faison says hello, Veronica. So we'll make sure we say hi to Scott, not just because he's got a great name. Alan Gold, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Damon, thank you for some great questions and conversation as well. Valerie. And then also we had some questions from Jessica. Our good friend Kurt Kendall. Kurt, I hope everybody is doing safe with your family up there in New Hampshire. Hope we look forward to seeing you soon. And our Mickey Pegg, who's tuned into a lot of these as well, says hello too. So want to make sure we say hi to everybody and all of our friends out there. We're missing you all, and look forward to a time. Alec Bradley says hi. I'm assuming that means everybody at Alec Bradley says hello, not just Alec. And then making sure that
we have Jared.
Jared gets his props in there too.
Yeah, Jared.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you so much for the panel for taking your time out of your day to join us and for all of your insights. There's a lot that we can unpack here, and I definitely think we should do a follow-up on this, and we can kind of go through some different things with state associations and state advocacy as we go through, and maybe we can get into some more of the details going through the handbook if people have specific questions about setting it up and how we might be able to offer some guidance. But just kind of want to underscore some points here that was made here is that really, manufacturers, please let's get the sales reps as involved as possible with our retailers on these state issues. It's going to take every single one of us to go on the offensive and work to stave off this tide of what might be coming at us next year. We'll be putting together a lot of great plans, a lot of great things in place in order to help all of us. But again, everybody working together here, I think we'll be successful. So thank you, Greg, Veronica, Tyler, Alex. Thank you so much for joining us today for a great panel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Just real quick, next week, we have a really good lineup next week and a good cross-section of what we've got. So on Tuesday, I'll be on with Bakersfield gentlemen to answer some questions. I think they probably have some questions about the announcement for the trade show and some other things. But Tuesday, we also have our affinity partners from Gallagher Affinity coming on talking to us about some programs that retailers can take advantage of to realize some savings during this time. And then Wednesday, we've got the Perdomo family, Nick Jr. and his son, Nicholas III, will be joining us. And then Thursday, we got confirmation that George Padron from Padron is going to join us for our show on Thursday next week. So we got a really fantastic lineup next week. Hope to see you all there next week. In the meantime, everybody stay safe, healthy, smoke a lot, sell a lot, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Bye.